Okay, so we ended yesterday with a couple of code, and today we are pretty much just gonna carry on with what we did yesterday. I'm just gonna open up my folder real quick in my code editor, and yeah, so we were able to review everything we learned from modules to how modules are made to how to use external modules in our program and naming conventions, some syntax. We were able to do quite a bit from creating an internal module in our system and calling it in another module that we also created. So, I mean, we are up to a great start. I'm already feeling like I'm good in Golang, but that's a joke, obviously. So today we're gonna be doing quite a little bit. Um, like I said yesterday, we're gonna be dealing with how to return and handle an error. As you can see, this is what we did yesterday, calling your code from another module. But today we're gonna be doing return and handle an error. So the documentation says handling errors is an essential feature. Obviously, we know that. And you add a bit of code to return an error and then handle it in the caller. Okay, I also want to figure out, okay, I'm guessing the caller here is the module that we created to call the previous module that we created. It says in greetings.go add the code highlighted below. Okay, so the highlights here are the blue ones here. We have errors. So I'm just gonna go to greet. I have a different file here, but I'm gonna take this out. I'm gonna open a parenthesis. I'm gonna put this here, and then I'm gonna import errors, which I believe is what's called. And it says if no name was given, return an error with a message. Okay, so here I want to say if, okay, if my name is equals to empty string, I believe, then I want to do something. I want to return an empty string, and then I also want to do errors dot new, and then I'm gonna call it what? Empty name. Okay, empty name in this case. And is there any specific thing I'm not doing properly? Okay, there's not really a specific thing I'm not doing. So I'm just gonna say new here, I believe. Now let me see what the error is here. It says package errors implement functions to manipulate errors. The new function creates errors whose only content is a text message. I believe that's what we did. And it says here an easy way to create wrapped errors is to call fmt.errorf and apply the verb to the error. I want to know what the problem is with what I did. Let's see. Let's go to let's expand on this, and then let's go to our problems here, and then let's see too many return values. Was I not meant to return that? I was meant to return it, I guess. uh I'm guessing I can just remove the, but then this makes no sense, right? Because interesting. Let's see if this is just a problem here. Let's run go run. Yes, cd into greet, and then go run this. Interesting. Okay, so I cannot just run that alone. Okay, in this function, you change the function so that it returns two values, a string and an error. Okay, I think the problem here is that we didn't update this. So we're meant to return string and error, right? And I didn't do that. So let's assume that's the problem. And I'm just gonna say string, and then I'm gonna do error. Okay, so that was the problem. I needed to pass in an error in order for me to use errors. Okay. Since here we are returning two things, obviously we need to return two things here. Okay, so that was my bad. So as you can see, when you're using the error package in Golang, you have to specify that there's going to be an error in the response, right? Especially in a case where you're returning two different things. You have to make sure that the types you have in your function head is corresponding to the returned values present in your code. So that was what was causing the problem, and that's why we couldn't run it. So, I think we've done this, which says if we are doing an if statement to check if this is a valid request, where an empty string is where the name should be, and then return an error if the request is invalid, and then nil, meaning no error, as a second value in the successful return. That way the caller can see that the function succeeded. I'm guessing that if we use the keyword nil here, right, it means that there's no error, but at the same time it also fulfills the requirement of having following the types that we have here for two responses, which is pretty great. Now we need to go to our main file and we need to do some changes here. So it says that we want to import log, right? And I'm interested to see what we're going to use log for. But here it says set properties of the predefined logger, including the log entry prefix and a flag to disable printing the time, source file, and line number. I do not have an idea why we are doing this, but it says to do log.setPrefix with greetings and then log.setFlag. So I'm just going to come here to the top and then I'm going to say log.setPrefix, and I think the prefix here is going to be greetings, and then log dot set flags, which is 0, right? And I'm guessing here the options that you have for log is just pretty much called flags. So I don't know how that works, but I think when you specify the flags you want, or you don't want any flags, then wait, let's just hold on this and let's see what it says. So set flags sets the output flags for the standard logger. The flag bits are L date, L time, and all. Okay, yeah, so exactly. So we have flags and we have a couple of flags, but we don't want to use any of those, so we are just pretty much setting it to 0, which makes a lot of sense. So request a greeting message, right? Okay. So yes, let me actually add this comment, request a greeting message, and let's see what this is gonna do for us. If an error was returned, print it to the console and exit the program. So we want to say message and error. So we want to specify message and then error, which I think corresponds with what we had with the two parameters we set in the function on the greetings, and then we want to say greetings or greet.greetme, which is the function that myself I have, and then I'm going to pass this here. And then after that we want to say if error. I'm thinking, oh, we are importing this error from the function there. If error is not equals to nil, then log dot fatal. Okay, now I see the point of the log, right? And then we're gonna pass in error here. Passing the error here, and then if there was no problem, then we want to just return fmt.println, and then we're going to pass in message here. Okay, so now I think I understand this very well. So in our code here, in the greet.go here, we specify two things. We are returning both a string and an error, right? So we are returning both the name or whatever we're going to do with this, and then we're returning an error. So there are two things that we can get from this data, or there are two responses that this greet_me function returns. In this case here, since we are trying to utilize it, we know that there are two things it returns. So we can specify this, the message being the string here and the error being the error that it returns. And then we perform this. So I think this is just pretty much us kind of like breaking down and saying that we need this or that we need that and everything, which is pretty decent in my opinion, right? I'm just gonna update this, and that's great. So let's see what happens when we run. We may go out here and do go run this. I think, okay, it actually gave us greetings hello, which is beautiful, right? I actually did that. It actually said that. We configured the log package to print the command name greetings at the start of its log messages without a timestamp or source file. Assign both of the hello return values, including the error, to variables. Okay, so what's happening here is that we are pretty much creating two variables called message and then one called error, and then we're now calling a function that will then pass to those things, right? Okay, great. And then I think the arrangement of this, error cannot come first before message, since that corresponds to the file there, which makes a lot of sense. And then we want to change the hello argument from Gladys name to an empty string, obviously, so that we can test the error. And then we want to look for a non-nil error value. There's no sense continuing in this case, obviously. And then use the function in the standard library to output error information. And then if we get an error, you use the log message fatal function to print that there. So interesting. Now that I think about this actually gave us hello, right? Which means there's still somewhere in our message or in our stuff that uses this. Okay, we were not using an empty string there. So I think that was the problem, right? So we realized that we're not using an empty string. So if we run this, we should get an error. It says greetings exit status 1, right? But it still did not give us the specific reason as to why we had that, right? It didn't tell us empty name or anything, right? I think we need to do errors.new empty name, right? Okay, so we were specifying what the error is going to be. Okay, so that was our problem. So now if we run this again, we should be getting empty name as an error. Great. So that works just fine. So we are pretty much good to go there. Now we've realized how to create and handle an error, how to return an error in Golang. This is pretty straight. This is a good one. We've made really good progress from the last video, and we're also gonna be handling return a random greeting. Okay, so in this module, in this section, you're gonna change your code so that instead of returning a single greeting every time, it returns one or several predefined greeting messages. Interesting. To do this, you're gonna use a go slice. Okay, a slice is like an array, except that its size changes dynamically as you add and remove items. The slice is one of Go's most useful types. You add a small slice to contain 3 greeting messages, then have your code return one of the messages randomly. For more on slices, see Go slices in the Go blog. We were going to look at all this individually later, but for now, let's just follow the sections of the tutorial here and get things going. So it says, in greetings, you're going to change your code so it looks like the following. So before we write the code, let's look at what's happening here. So we are importing a module called, or a package called math/rand, which I believe means random here. So pretty much I think we are specifying that, okay, hey, in the math package, we want to call the rand function. I think this is how you call specific functions in like a package. And then it says here that we want to do this, right? So if there is no name, right, we should return that there's no name. However, if there's a name, we want to do fmt.printf the sprintf random format. Now, this random format is an interesting thing because we need to figure out what random format is. I'm guessing it's okay. It's this function down here. So let's see what it does. So random format returns one of a set of greetings. The returned message is selected at random. So random function random format. Okay, since you're not passing anything to it, it's empty, but we're going to be returning a string, and then the format is going to be this. Okay, so in order for you to create a slice from how they're showing it here, you first of all create an array, and then you specify what the array is going to be filled with. In this case here, we are creating an array of strings. So that's why we have the box brackets and then a string, and I can see that there's no spacing here in between any of these, so I think that's quite an important distinction to note. So we have three things here, and I guess when you separate using a comma, it just specifies that this is an item inside of this array and everything. And then it says return a randomly select message format by specifying a random index for the slice of formats. Interesting. So we are saying formats, which is this, and then we are saying okay, return format, which is return the array or the variable that we did, but specific to this we want to do rand.intn, which I don't really know what intn means. And we have length and then format. So this is an interesting syntax here. Let's read further to see what it means. So we are adding a random format function that returns a randomly selected format for a greeting message. Okay, note that random format starts with a lowercase letter, making it accessible only to code in its own package. Obviously we are not going to use this in another package. And then we have a declares a format slice with 3 message formats, and then you omit its size in the bracket like this. So you do this, okay, which makes a lot of sense. And then we use the match rand to generate a random number for selecting an item from the slice. Okay. In hello, call the random format function to get a format for the message you return, then use the format and name value together to create the message. Okay, I think I understand what this is now. I still don't understand fully well what intn means, but I can see that what's happening here is that we are calling this function, and what we are doing is that we are passing the length of this message here so that the thing can generate a number based on that length. So we have 0, 1, 2. So every single time it's going to use, okay, hey, we pretty much have three items inside of this array here, or 3 slices inside of this array. And then since there are 3 of them, we want to randomly select between these 3, right, which is going to be 0, 1, 2 in this case here, right? Which makes a lot of sense. Okay, I guess that works. And then here we're gonna just add a message here, but this time we're gonna do Gladys. And okay, let's see how this works, right? Let's actually implement this in our code. So we're gonna go to greet. You're gonna go to greet.go and or whatever file you create, right? Feel free to never just follow the naming convention fully here. Obviously, when you're doing things like packages, you want to follow that exactly the way it's shown, but feel free to sort of diversify yours, make yours a little bit different, not follow the names and everything, so that your mind kind of like processes that, okay, hey, it's not just following what was written word for word on the documentation, but more or less, that this is how you structure it in a sense. So here we're just going to import the math/random function, and then what we want to do is we want to say message. Okay, so the last time we did this, let's close our terminal. If name, okay, we already have that, and then we can say here message is fmt dot sprintf, and then we want to say random format, which is the function that we have not created, and then we want to pass name. So I'm guessing that, okay, no. It's going to return this, and then it's also going to return name. So this is not being passed to this in any way, just so you know. And then we're going to come here, and then we're going to create the random format function. And then it returns a string from what I can remember. And then what we want to do is that we want to say formats is equals to pretty much an array of string. And then we want to specify this here, which is like hello, hi there, welcome to the club. Something like this, if I remember correctly from what we read. Okay, great. So we're gonna go just call this formats rather, and then we're doing that, and then we have this here, and then we're gonna return, and then what we're returning is gonna be the formats, and then inside of here we're gonna do the rand. Interesting. Rand.intn. Okay, so let's see what it is. Intn returns as an integer a non-negative pseudo-random number in the half open value 0 to n from the default source. It panics if n is less than or equals to 0, obviously. So if you have an empty string, this is going to have an issue because there's nothing that it can generate from randomly, but obviously you want to have n greater than or equals to 1, right, for this to work. So what we're going to do here is then we're going to say length, I believe, which length in this case is okay, it returns the length of v, right? So pretty much whatever is in the brackets of len, which is length in this case, it's going to return the length of that, right? So in an array, it's going to return the number of elements in the array, as you can see right here from the code. I mean, you guys should always hover over function names and just read the built-in documentation. I promise you it helps a lot. And then we're going to say formats here, and I believe we're good to go in that regards. Is there anything that I'm missing? Okay, yeah, I did not return this. It's meant to be message new, and then I'm gonna just ignore this here, and then I want to see where do we utilize name. I still have no idea where we are utilizing name here. Okay, we are, my bad, I had mine set to my name here. Okay, great. So we have our code, which is looking great, and then we want to go and edit the last one, which is going to be our main.go, which is message error greetings dot greet me, and then here we're going to say Aldorax, and save. I think that's pretty much it. No, not this. And then if this okay, now let's go to our terminal and let's run this, and hopefully everything runs just fine. Okay, hi there, extra string Aldorax. Hi, welcome to the club, extra string Aldorax. And then hello, extra string Aldorax. I don't think it's meant to return that way. So let's see what we are doing here that's wrong. Are we using a different FMT that we're not meant to use? Or what exactly is the problem? So in our grid.go, we are using the sprintf, which is correct. And then here we're also using a return this. So what exactly is the problem? I'm gonna just do something here. I'm gonna do the print line. Okay, you cannot do a print line for this. You have to do an sprint. Wait, let's actually figure out why we cannot do a print line for this. So one variable, but print line returns 2. Print line format uses a default format for its operands and writes to standard output. Spaces are always added between operands and a new line is appended. It returns the number of bytes written and any write error encountered, right? And I'm guessing that we cannot specify more than one thing here. So let's actually see. Okay, that is not working. Why is that not working? Let's figure that out. Okay, let's figure that out. print line uses this. So print line n is equals to int error error. Okay, so it returns one thing, but I think you cannot pass a function to print line. It pretty much prints something there. So it cannot call the function here, which is the problem I see now. So sprintf, it formats according to a format specifier and returns the resulting string. Okay, which in this case I believe it's gonna run this and then it's gonna format that and then it's going to then return that as a string, right? So that was the issue here, I guess. So I'm guessing, I don't know why we still have this. I guess I need to remove the log, okay? Or do I still leave the logs? No, I guess I don't need to leave the logs. However, it did return this for me just fine though. Welcome to the club, Audorax, hi there, Audorax, and then that's okay. That's fine, that looks great. So now we know how to return a random greeting. We've learned a little bit on how to use the standard math module and the random function present in that. So then return greetings for multiple people, which will be the last thing for this video before we go for the next one. In this change, you learn how you make changes to your code. You add support for greeting multiple people in one request. In other words, you handle a multi-value input, then pair values in that input with a multi-value output. To do this, you need to pass a set of names to a function that can return a greeting for each of them. But there's a hitch. Changing the hello function's parameter from a single name to a set of names will change the function's signature. If you had already published the example.com greetings module and users had already written code called hello, this change will break their program, obviously, right? Because this is a new version, we are doing a breaking change here. So in this situation, a better choice is to write a new function with a different name. The new function will take multiple parameters that preserve the old function for backwards compatibility. Okay, great. So we are still going to have this, but then we're going to create a new function, which is then going to do what we want it to do, right? So that anybody who's using the previous version of the code will still be able to do what they're doing there, but have the chance to also upgrade into this new version that has the new function that we're going to be creating now. So in this case here, we can see the code that we are doing. Let's go through it a little bit. So hello returns a map that associates each of the named people with a greeting message. Okay, now that I look at it here, I can see that names, we are specifying that names here is going to be an array of strings, right? So it's going to have, it's pretty much slices. And then what we are returning here is going to be a map. And then this map is going to be of a string, right? An array of string, right? To a string. So it's going to be a string to string map, right? Which is an array itself having a string, which I'm guessing is going to be the array that we're passing here. And then the string here is going to be the response. And then we're also going to be returning an error. This is an interesting and complicated one, right? Now we're getting into a couple of interesting syntax, right? So messages, we're creating a variable here, which is called make. I don't know what make does, but we're going to figure that out as we read through. So we have make, and then we have map, and then we have string. So what happens is loop through the received slice of names, calling the hello function to get a message for each name. So for underscore name, we have range names, okay. Message error is going to be the function hello name, which is the function here. And then if error is not nil, that means if there's an error present, then return the error. But then if there's no error, then return the message is nil. Okay, this is an interesting thing. Let's actually read on this a little bit. So we add a hellos function whose parameter is a slice of names rather than a single name. We change one of its return types from a string to a map, so you can return names mapped to greeting messages. Then the hello function is calling the previous hello function that we created to reduce duplication while also having both functions in place. And then it creates a message map to associate each of the received names as a key, right? So I think every name that we pass in, Emmanuel, Adorax, Cynthia, or whatever, with a generated message as a value in Go, you initialize a map with the following syntax: make, map, key type. Okay, so we are doing make, right? I guess make is how you instantiate this, and then we do map, then we are passing in the key type and then the value type. Okay, the key type here, so it's a key value pair pretty much, right? So we have okay, which in a sense it's pretty much, if you want to know what a key value pair is, I'm just going to create something for you here. I'm just going to say name Emmanuel. So this here is a key value pair. The key is name and then the value is Emmanuel, obviously, right? So that's what it's doing here. So it's specifying here that in this case, you know, if you notice, we have this as a string and then we have this as a string. This could be a non-string, right? This could actually be a number called 10. In this case here, it would be age, right? So this is also a key value pair. So that's what it's doing here. So the key type is going to be string and then the value type is also going to be string. That's fine. And then we return this map to the caller. That's also fine. And then we loop through the names that we received, and then we check that each has a non-empty value, which is also fine, right? And then associate a message with each. In this for loop, range returns two values: the index of the current item in the loop and a copy of the item's value. You don't need the index, so you just use the go blank identifier, which is an underscore, obviously. Okay, so an underscore here is pretty much an identifier here when you don't necessarily need to use an index, right? So you're not indexing anything, you're just using an identifier to ignore it. We're going to read a little bit more into this blank identifier. I'd like to know how this is used properly, but in this case here, it's pretty understandable what we need to do. So we're just going to quickly implement this in our code. I'm going to just delete this file. I'm going to go into greet here, and then I'm going to say function greets me, right? Or I can say something like greet us. And here I'm going to pass in names, which is going to be an array of names of type string. And then we're going to have in here a map, right? Okay, we're going to have a map, which is going to be of type string to string. And then we're going to return error too. And then we're going to instantiate this, and then we're going to pretty much create, okay, we're going to say messages is equal to, what did I do, is do that, is equal to this. And to create it, we do a make. So we say make here, and then we do a map, and then we pass in, I think, this, okay, which is string, right? So we pass in the string, and then we pass in the string here. So we pretty much just copy what we had here when we create this. And then how do we utilize this? Okay, so for so for underscore slash nil in range of names, or rather messages. Should I call this messages or names? This is an interesting thing. Okay, this cannot be messages because this is names. We need to use the names that we're getting in. So in names, we want to do something, and what we want to do here is we want to call, okay, so we're going to say message error is equals to greet me name, greet me and then name, right? Okay, but in this case here, it's not meant to be underscore error, it's meant to be underscore name. And then we are going to pass in name here. And then obviously if error is not equal to nil, then we want to return error. Okay, we want to return nil and error, nil and then error, and then we want to return message, I believe. Okay, we're not returning message yet. We are associating the retrieved message in the name, so we're going to say message, or rather messages, and then we're going to say name here is equals to message. Okay, and then after that we're going to return new messages, or sorry, that'll be messages first and then new. Okay, are we missing out on anything? No, we are not. And then we're going to go to main.go, and then what we're going to do here is that after the flags we're going to instantiate the names. The names is going to be a map, which is going to be a map of strings. And then what are we going to do? We're going to pass in the names, and then we're going to say Aldorax, Emmanuel, and let's say Sam. And then we're going to do, okay, we have the message. What did I do here? Okay, we're gonna have message greetings the hellos. Okay, so instead of this we're gonna say greetings dot greet us, and then instead of passing this here I'm gonna pass in names, and after that I'm gonna do the same thing that I did before, but instead this time I'm gonna say, instead of this being message, I'm gonna say messages, right, just for proper naming convention. And then we're gonna run this, and hopefully we don't have an error. Okay, hi there, Aldorax. Great, hello, Emmanuel, and then welcome to the club, Sam. Okay, great. So we can see this work just fine, which is good, We've done really great. So we learned a couple of things today. The first thing we did was learn how to utilize the math/random module in order for us to create random messages to return as greetings in our greet function here. So we specify the messages that we want, or the greeting messages, and then for each of these messages we want to select a random one that will be used every time we call the function, right? Specific to, there's a possibility of obviously it's using the same one multiple times in a go, right? But again, it's random, right? It just performs that randomly. We also learned how to create another function that calls a previous function, especially in a case where we are trying to upgrade a version of the project. And in this case here, what we did was we had the greetme function, which was for a singular use case, and then the greeters, which was for multiple messages to multiple people response. And then we learned how to create slices, right, which is pretty much a string, an array of string, right? This is how we create slices here. Then we learned how to create a map, right? A map is pretty much how in modern terms you call a dictionary, right? And what happens here is that we are taking in the data that we have from the strings that we passed in the names, and then we are pairing that with a value which is also of type string, and then we're also returning an error, right? So we also learned how to do error handling in this place here to know how things work. And obviously we learned about range, and then we also learned about make. So make here, what make does is it allocates and initializes an object of type slice, map, or chan, right? So the first argument is a type, not a value. Unlike new, make's return type is the same as the type of its argument, which is beautiful, right? So since we say this is our argument here, which is a map of string, or rather an array of strings to string pair, that means you're going to be returning that, or you're going to be seeing that in the response given to us. And then we also have the underscore here. The underscore here is just pretty much an identifier in Golang, especially when you're not using an index. And then range, what range does here, as you can see when we hover over range, is interesting. Why is this not returning the values to me? So let's do this, right? I want to just get you guys to do this, right? So let's say range in Go. Okay, beautiful. So this is it here. So the range form of the for loop iterate over a slice or map. Beautiful. So what it does is that it just goes through the slice here, and then it says, okay, hey, since we have names, which is an array, we want to go through each and every single one of them, and then for each and every single one of them we want to do something, right? We want to create a message, and the message is going to be calling the previous function, which is for a single person, but for one of the people in this array, which are multiple people in this case, and then we want to pass in the name. And then if there's an error, obviously return the error. However, if there's no error, then what we want to do is that we want to then grab that response, and then we want to map that response to the value name, which is present here. And then we also learn how to utilize this in our main code. We learn how to instantiate an empty array and actually pass values for the strings here, which we do in this way by using curly brackets, which is really great. And then we learn how to just update our function and then pretty much call that. So it's been a good one. In the next video of this series, we are going to be learning how to add a test into our code, and then after that we're going to learn how to compile and then install the application. And then after that we would be having a conclusion and then links to more documentation that one can use and everything. But so far so good. We've actually covered a huge amount, right? If you've made it up to the point of this video where we are right now, I would say that we are pretty much a good progress there. I think I can go brag to some of my Golang friends now that I know a little bit about Golang. Obviously not crazy, right? Let them not stress me with anything, but we do know a huge amount of things here, not just about Golang and its syntax in itself, but also about things like arrays, slices, randoms, integers, and multiple different types in Golang, right? So get ready for the next video. It will be coming out either by the end of today or tomorrow, and then we will also be concluding with the series, and then we'll proceed to learning more difficult things, expanding our knowledge about this, going into each and every one of the individual tabs that I open, right, specific to the links present in this documentation here, and actually reading this and actually just experimenting around, figuring out what things does. For example, in the FMT package we have a huge amount of functions here, a huge amount of functions. I would like to know what each and every single function of this does, and then we would actually go through them, and then we would figure out, okay, hey, this is a case where I can use this is a case where I don't want to use this, and just pretty much get better at this, get them into our memory, especially the standard packages. Pretty much we would also be going through more standard libraries on Golang outside of just the FMT and the maths libraries. We'll be going into more. I don't know what they are, but we would obviously explore that. So really great, guys, and thank you so much for the video. If you have any questions, if there are any things that you feel like I might have gotten wrong here, probably in my own understanding, feel free to drop it in the comments. And if the video helped you in any way and you feel like you're learning, feel free to drop a like. Feel free to subscribe if you want. At the end of the day, it's your choice, and thank you.